I wanted to play a little clip that I came across a moment ago. As people know, and we all know, we've done a lot on him, particularly his horrifying right wing turn later in life. But as people know, myself and Matt and Ben all used to be big fans of Christopher Hitchens before his right wing turn. And I'm not playing these in any way to kind of sanitize his image, but one thing about him is he was a very effective communicator, and maybe somebody watching this later, um, might be swayed by it because one thing that's interesting about Christopher Hitchens is the people who've ended up holding his legacy tend to be more on the right, for sure, right? And this kind of like new atheist movement that is gung ho of supporting Israel in a way that's sort of bizarre to me. But we have some vintage Christopher Hitchens here for y'all talking about Israel and Palestine in a way that I think might shock some people who only consider Hitchens to be a kind of neocon. Um, so let's just play a little bit of this as a reminder of somebody who was saying these things on American, television, on C-SPAN in particular. That would still even get you in a lot of trouble for saying, and Hitchens is right in most of these.
Good morning.
Great. I like your type of argument. You basically have intellectual discussion instead of a screaming argument. I'm a libertarian. I'm basically on the opposite side of the spectrum as you. But I wonder if you could clarify a couple things for me. I believe Palestine was the entire area covering Israel and Jordan. I wonder if you could tell me at what point the Palestinians went to Jordan, and I realized they were kicked out when they blew up some passenger jets or something. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, I think more than you are, by the sound of it. I'm not sure. I don't. Well, go ahead.
Basically revolved around the Palestinians that were from Israel. I don't understand if there's 22 Arab states, why they have to take over Israel.
Uh-huh. Well, there are 49 American states. If someone told you couldn't, apart from the one you're sitting in, if someone told you, actually, we would rather have your bit of Los Angeles for ourselves, from now on, this will only be, you can only be a landholder or a householder here if you profess the, let's say, Muslim or Buddhist faith. Otherwise, get out. This bit's ours. You're happy to go to Colorado on that basis? I don't think so, and I think if you think about it, you wouldn't insult anyone else by treating them, their society or their country as disposable as that. The Palestinians do not feel that God gave the land to someone else and they therefore have to be flung out. And I completely agree with them. They've every right to resist that ridiculous proposal.
Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
So we'll get to this second one in just a moment. But I think that this again is a good example of the way that these things get sort of turned into simplistic and incorrect views by like a lack of understanding history and context. But most importantly, I think a kind of as a subject. I mean, a lot of people have a hard time putting themselves into the Palestinian position and what that experience has been like. And I think Kitchens, making the argument there about saying it's like, well, how would you feel if your home of Los Angeles, California, was suddenly taken from you, and to live there, you had to uh, take on another faith and another identity, lose the ability of self-government and self-rule. It's such a simple kind of argument that he's making here, but it's very profound, right? Because I think a lot of people don't consider it or think about it like this at all. Instead, it's this kind of simplistic numbers game, numbers question. So I think that's a good one. Let's play this a little bit of this next one here, which is with Sullivan. I'm forgetting his first name, who's still around writing, and Hitchens going a little back and forth on this question.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. A question for Mr. Hitchens, please.
You're on.
Ask away.
Do you believe it's healthy for the United States to be so much influenced by Israel. We are a large country. They are very small, but they have much influence in the media and especially in politics.
Thanks.
Well, believe me, I know, I believe I understand the question, and there are various tones of voice in which it can be asked, and including a tone of voice that I don't like, that suggests that there's a sort of covert Jewish hand that directs U.S. policy, which is not true, and very often clusters with other forms of unpleasantness. I do think that the United States gives far too great a proportion of its military aid budget to Israel, and in return asks for insufficient Israeli responsibility. The Israelis are the custodians of the West Bank via an act of war. Their occupation of it is not recognized as legal. I've already said what I think should happen about that. There should be a West Bank state. The United States could make that difference. You could say to the Israelis, we will defend the existence of a Jewish community or a Jewish state in Palestine. We will not underwrite it becoming an expansionist and colonial state. If you want to do that, you pay the difference yourself. That alone would have probably solved the problem by now. And I do wish, yes, if you want to put it like that, that there was more cogent discussion along those lines in both the media and in Congress. And as for the Israelis, everybody knows that, because I mustn't seem to duck that question, because I know how toxic it is. Everybody knows that if you want to occupy people against their will, if you want to be the governor of another people who haven't chosen you, you will end up visiting terrible cruelty on them. There certainly cannot be a humane occupation. And the majority of...
So, and again, I think that, that's another good clip of being able to, speak to the lobbying role of organizations like AIPAC in this country without falling into some of the traps that we see out here, and also pushing back against the very real and nasty accusations that you do hear from time to time, and not playing any ball with them, condemning them immediately, but also being able to move on and talk about the very real dynamics and political conditions. I'm going to play one last one from a very, very young Hitch, and then I'm probably going to run. But appreciate all of y'all so much. But let's hear one more here. Because this is a pretty good collection of Hitchens' responses to a lot of these questions. And also, one thing to note is it's just how much has happened, right, over these past few decades, and also how much the fundamentals of the conversation are very similar.
Christopher Hitchens, let's go to Cambridge, Maryland. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. Mr. Hitchens, I have 3 direct questions, short questions for you, please. Do you feel that Israel has a right to exist within secure borders? Do you feel that the United States should intervene should Iran and/or Russia try to close the Straits of Hormuz? And would you seek relief from a 24-hour shoot-on-site curfew from any quarter in which relief might be found? Thank you.
All right, thanks for the call.
Very good questions, and I think I know what you're trying to pin me down on. On the first, yes, I do, but I think the securely recognized borders should not allow for Israeli colonization or occupation of the territory of its neighbors, which is what it's doing now. The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. So the right to exist argument is going to rebound on those who use it unclearly and who don't say what they mean by Israel. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks the borders of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if Israel's going to insist on the right to exist, if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
I'd better give you the straight answer.
I'll just say I like my Hitchens like I like my wine, young and red. I'm gonna run, but I just want to say, just very briefly in closing, we're certainly going to be covering this a lot over, as long as we need to. But I wanted to sort of end on a note of practical consideration for the American left and labor movement on this question. The American left, from progressives to the members of the DSA to the organization of the DSA, has sort of been embroiled in a conflict under the radar for a while now over the question of supporting Palestinian humanity and liberation. And one of the and with high cost. I've been extremely frustrated with some of members of our movement, some of the leadership, and some of the activities and statements and things that have happened over the past few days. I've been pleasantly surprised by some. Um, but I think that zooming out a little bit, we have to look at the context of building a strong labor movement and left in this country, um, and supporting the humanity and dignity of Palestinians puts a big target on the left's back. And there's always been this kind of question about whether or not the left, should maybe hold these principles, but hold them kind of privately and quietly. Um, I think with what we're seeing right now, it is extremely clear that backing down is an evacuation of any commitment to internationalism, to solidarity, and to humanity itself. And this is not a time to be timid. This is a time to say we are against apartheid. We are against the occupation. We condemn, attacks of violence against civilians by Hamas. But that does not mean that we no longer think that Palestinians have deserve dignity, humanity, and deserve to have a future. It is very clear right now. You're seeing it particularly in a state like New York. The entire Democratic Party is attacking the DSA in particular, with some of the most vitriolic language, attempts to sideline them, to demobilize, and to defeat that political movement, using this as this conflict as a kind of pretext for that. This is a time for us to be able to band together and to show solidarity, and to recognize that there is no middle road on this question. You are either for the dignity of Palestinian people, or you are not. And anyone who continues to make this argument that you can be progressive except for Palestine, I think they might need to be shown the door in our political movement. Because on a basic question of human rights, of humanity, um, and of human dignity, which anyone who considers themselves to be a progressive or a socialist should be willing to stand up for and demand for others. This is a real test of people's commitment, because the same people who are cowardly in the face of insults and even attacks from elected officials that we've been seeing, they will be just as timid on domestic issues. I mean, could you imagine? Um, you've seen time and time again. Some people who sort of cozy up to this movement will turn their backs on us very, very quickly when it gets difficult. You saw that with Bernie Sanders campaigns, for example. Certainly, we'll see that if we start getting more gains in the labor movement. Um, so this is a kind of non-negotiable fight. And I think that this is a difficult moment because of what's happening in Gaza. I think it's been a difficult moment because a lot of people are showing their true colors and their commitment to human rights and their belief in those concepts. Um, but I think that this is a kind of big watershed moment in the movement that we're building. And with that, friends, I'm going to run. We'll be back this Sunday with a bonus episode for Left Reckoning patrons. You get access to that, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We will be back on Tuesday with the main show. Appreciate everybody for spending some time with me this Thursday afternoon. Look out for each other, and take care, friends. See you soon.